test today compared to the white pan bread? Faster. Why do you think it was faster? The yeast is already active, and in addition to it already being active, there's more of it. So you start with like this amount of yeast, and then you do sponge, and you have this amount of yeast. So one of the advantages of the sponge method is that your fermentation time of your bulk fermentation of your dough usually is going to be less than if you went straight dough. So we're going to hurry along this bulk fermentation. So today on your timeline, if you have an hour down, you probably don't need an hour. Okay, so I'm going to talk for like 3 minutes, and then I want you to check your dough. So bulk fermentation is faster. What would be another advantage? Flavor. You're going to get a lot more flavor if you make your dough out of the sponge method. This is going to be important if you're doing something that's real plain, like French bread. What are the ingredients in the French bread? Flour, water, yeast, salt. Okay, so you've got to get some flavor in there. Sponge method, that's how you're going to get your flavor. Other advantages, sponge method. Why would you use the sponge method?
Longer shelf life?
Yeah, longer shelf life. Where'd you find that info, in the book? On the,
Battery dough mixing method?
okay, has anybody read that handout? Hold that up. Okay, so I handed out batter dough mixing method. I handed this out. In fact, you want to read this. There's a lot of information in here. It goes through the 12 steps. There's a lot of information on each step. There's information on the methods. So Alex gets a gold star today because he read it. Maybe you get an extra piece of bread. What else? Sponge method. Why do we like the sponge method? Okay, you get some flexibility here with your time. You can make the sponge an hour to 24 hours ahead of time. Come in, you start mixing. So let's say you make your sponge and you're planning on making your dough in 3 hours from the sponge. But then something happens. You got to run out and pick up your dog in the bed or whatever. Do you know how to turn that off? You want to turn it to the left. Otherwise you're setting it for another minute. So flexibility. You have a lot of flexibility in there. You can pick up that sponge from an hour to 24 hours and mix. So you can plan your day. If your day doesn't go well, you still have the sponge. You can mix it later. Once you mix your dough, though, you kind of have to go along with those 12 steps where you have to retard your dough. So you've got a lot of flexibility. Bakers really like it for that. Flex time. Anything else? Anything else? You use less yeast. So you're giving that yeast a big head start for it to reproduce. So in your formula, you're going to use less yeast. Okay, so your basic sponge, it's going to be water, flour, yeast. You might give it a little bit of food, and that would have been the malt syrup that we don't have here. Depends on how long you're going to hold that sponge. I would not give sugar or anything to a sponge I'm trying to hold for 24 hours. If I want to hurry along that sponge and use it in 2-3 hours, I maybe would give a little bit of sugar. What you don't want to use for your sponge if you're holding overnight is anything like milk for your liquid instead of water. I wouldn't put any eggs in there. I wouldn't put any fat in there. Fat's going to slow down your yeast. I wouldn't put my salt in there. So pretty much you can take any basic recipe, lean dough recipe, and that is a straight dough, and you can turn it into a sponge. I'm going to give you just some rough guidelines by using all of your water, half of your flour, and all of your yeast. So that white pan bread that we made the other day, you can take that recipe, take half of your flour, all of your water, all of your yeast, make a sponge with that. Give it whatever length of time you want to give it. It needs to look bubbly. And then add the remaining ingredients to it and mix. So these are just general guidelines. You go through the book and there are some specific sponge recipes. Those are just general guidelines. Okay? think we need to check some dough. You're gonna find that your dough today might be a little sticky, so when you punch, it might stick to your hand. So flour your hand first. Gently press down, use your hand scraper to fold over, okay? You're gonna punch it down, and then what's your next step after punching? Portioning. What are you doing today for portioning? 2 pieces, equal weight, right? Okay, so just kind of loaf up your dough and eyeball it and cut it in half and then weigh it. You want to avoid little tiny pieces of dough that you're tearing the gluten. So if you're within an ounce of where you should be, that's good. You don't have to cut up dough. So you want to eyeball 2 pieces, and what are you going to do with it? You're going to round and then you're going to bench. So after benching, when we get to the makeup, then I'll show you some techniques for makeup. So go ahead and check your dough. If you've been in at least 35, 40 minutes, you want to check your dough.